Hey, it's your girl, your favorite paralegal, aka Cassandra Lynn, and welcome to Legal Doc Talk 24/7. So I can't believe I forgot to read the letter of the contents of what they took out of Diddy's cell. So this is part two of the Diddler. All right. So here you have on the screen is another letter that was addressed to the court today. And it reads, the defense writes this letter in advance of today's hearing and in response to the government's letter of November 18th, 2024. The government's letter only reinforces the fact that the government has committed a rigorous, willful, and harmless breach of the attorney-client privilege and has become privy to defendants and defense counsel's trial strategy, including areas of expert testimony, witness strategy, and other confidential. Number one, the materials provided to defense counsel. So this is pretty much what was given to Diddy's attorneys. Defense counsel has been provided with 19 pages of material seized from Mr. Combs' locker at the MDC. According to the government, these 19 pages were given to and are in possession of the trial team, which has already started using these privileged material to its advantage. And they reference docket entry 72 at number 2, including its opposition to bail, and we read that. Based on the materials provided as Exhibit A, it appears a government investigator took photos of several different items. These include one, intact pages from two different legal pads, two, pages of an address book, three, a ripped out folded over page of a third legal pad, 4, a ripped out page of another legal pad, and 5, a ripped out page of yet a different legal pad, as will be described below. The first page is a page from a folded over intact legal pad. Let me see. In it, footnote 1 says, in its letter from yesterday, the government refers repeatedly to a notebook. The documents provided to counsel do not show any notebook. They show a number of legal pads. The second page is a copy of the first page, but is partially enlarged. Pages 3 through 11 are pages on an address book. The 12th page appears to be the first page of a second legal pad. The 13th page is a second photograph of the same page or a different Xerox copy of the same photograph. Pages 14, 15, and 16 appear to be folded over pages of the same intact legal pad. Page 17 is a single folded piece of paper removed from yet another legal pad. This legal pad has 3 vertical lines down the left side, whereas the other 2 legal pads had 1 line down the left side. Page 18 is a single sheet of paper ripped out of the legal pad. Page 19 appears to be a ripped out single sheet of paper from a fourth legal pad. This legal pad has no vertical lines on the left side. Also, this legal pad has 21 lines, whereas the first 2 legal uh, pads have 35 lines. Child, when I tell you they broke this, they analyzed this. Based on the materials provided, it appears that the investigator took photos of more than only the notebook and address book as represented in the court's November 18th, 2024 letter. Rather, he appears to have taken photos of the pages of several legal pads, both pages that were intact in the legal pad as well as loose pages. It bears reminding that the clear written statements of the defendant were not provided to the defense as part of the government's discovery or Brady obligations. If it were not for the fact that the government used portions of privileged material in an effort to hold Mr. Combs in jail, we would still never have them or even known about them. 2. The notes are obviously privileged. One of the pages provided to counsel, 11 pages are Mr. Combs' notes to to and with his lawyers. These notes reflect actual conversations with his attorneys concerning aspects of the trial preparation and his efforts to be released on bail. And footnote 2 reads, attached as Appendix A is a sealed ex parte affirmation of Tini Goregas, Esquire, and that's the attorney, explaining the contents of these notes. We respectfully request that his affirmation be filed under seal and ex parte to prevent further disclosure of privileged information. To be clear, Mr. Combs never waived privilege over these materials, and as soon as the defense learned of the disclosure in the government's file, requested their return and destruction. All right. Then it says the notes refer to defense counsel by name, including discussions of defense experts and witnesses, discuss cross examination and credibility of witnesses, and overall defense strategy. Mr. Combs' handwritten notes covered legal strategy are now in the hands of the trial prosecutors, who hope to take advantage of the bench they committed to better prepare for the May 2025 trial, bring new charges, and argue for Mr. Combs' detention. Mr. Combs keeps his legal material in his locker. His notes are in the form of a number of legal pads, several of which the government has photographed, as well as loose pieces of paper of which he makes notes. On top of his legal pads and notes, he has a folder marked legal. This is to put anyone on notice that everything along with the folder marked legal is exactly what it says, legal attorney client material that he brings to the meetings with his lawyer and prepare his investigative and his strategy. That is clear. That is attorney client privilege. Because remember when I was saying that, it's different when you are talking with your attorney in the setting, but if he is like if they send him mail or any type of correspondence, that's attorney client privilege. If he sends anything to the attorney, then that's attorney client privilege. So in my I think 2 videos ago, or the video I did yesterday, I was like, well, did he mark them? How would they be able to indicate if it is attorney-client privilege? But now it's clear. He had a folder that stated attorney-client materials, legal. The government, it's not looking good, man. It's not looking good. The third footnote says Mr. Combs' counsel previously attempted to provide him with Wedwell folders to assist in organizing his legal papers, but the materials were rejected by MWC. Those we use those, and that's why you have old school attorneys out here and you have the new school attorneys out here. The new school attorneys will have everything on a laptop. I love those attorneys. But then you got some attorneys when it's ready for trial. I'll never forget. I literally spent 12 hours for one case that didn't even go to trial because they settled. But 12 hours at the office prepping, making sure that I had every document there was in this case in a orderly fashion. And so the Redwell folders think about an accordion. You have a folder and you place the documents in, and it just expands. The Redwell folder. Oh my God. The government. All right, continuing. When he finishes meeting with his lawyers, he brings his legal materials back to his locker where they are kept with a clear warning written on the folder that these are his legal materials. So, when investigator 1, who we will get into in a minute, saw a manila folder marked legal, that this was his cue that all legal pads and loose pages of the legal pads that were accompanied with it were Mr. Combs' legal materials. I see this now. I think what they're going to say is everything that was in the legal folder, that is attorney confidential, but anything outside of it is not, because it wasn't labeled. That's what they're going to try to fight. Oh my gosh. But his attorneys tried to get him those folders so that way everything could fit in that Wedrail folder, and they rejected it. So, ooh, child. Um, if the warning wasn't enough, the notes are obviously legal material that he discussed with his lawyer. They repeatedly referred to his lawyers by name. On the 14th page, he writes about, and then he wrote that it is hard to imagine a more evidently privileged conversation than a trial lawyer defending a defendant about a blank, and that the defendant writing it down in his legal materials because it is so important. On the same, Mr. Combs wrote about blank. This is a Heartland trial strategy being expressed in detail in notes of conversations between Mr. Combs and his lawyers. The fact that a government investigator, government tank team, and the entire prosecution team viewed this and still believed that they could keep the notes and use them against Mr. Combs is unfathomable. Worse still, that the government took notes directed to his lawyer too in preparation for trial, and then used those notes as a basis for claiming that he was attempting to tamper with witnesses is astonishing. So remember what we was talking about in the last video, before the last video. Um and it's all over the internet now that he was bribing witnesses and trying to what you call it, not discourage them but intimidate them. So that's the news that came out. So so Diddy's attorney is like, y'all just sat there and used these notes and came up with a whole nother scenario to fit whatever objective that you guys are coming with. Oh my. As discussed above, the notes are replete with discussions of legal strategy between Mr. Combs and his lawyers, all of which should have been obvious to everyone who looked at these notes: Investigator 1, the tank team, and the trial team. The government, the government did not inform defense counsel that it had Mr. Combs' notes is evidence that the government is acting willfully. As noted, the government did not produce these notes of defendant's own statements to the defense as part of its discovery obligations. The opening paragraphs of Federal Rule Criminal Procedure 16 requires the government to disclose defendant's written or recorded statement to the defense. And that's technically, whether it's federal or state, that's what you're supposed to do. um One would think this would be especially urgent when the written statements at issue are in the form of the defendant's own handwriting notes that were taken from his cell and which reflects specific conversations with his counsel. But the government did not produce these in discovery. My gosh, my gosh, my gosh. I paused there because that's not good. In discovery, you have to give them everything that you obtain from your client and you obtain through subpoena or discovery request. So, by the government they failed to give it to the defense counsel. I don't know if you guys followed the Alec Baldwin case where he accidentally pow-powed someone on the set of a movie and they were unalived. His trial was mistried. It was dismissed. It was declared a mistrial because the state had evidence that marked in a different evidence folder, not pertaining to the case at hand, but a different evidence folder that had a different case name. So when the defense found out about it, that's pretty much, oh my gosh. Yeah, y'all better hope that this don't be a mistrial. Yeah, we better hope this is not a mistrial. Whew. Nor did the government's tank team, established for precisely this type of situation, contact counsel and advise counsel that it was in possession of defendant's handwritten notes. As part of the hearing and to determine what sanction is appropriate for the egregious, self-evident privilege breach, defense counsel wants to know exactly how the decision was made and by who to not contact defense counsel when the United States Attorney's Office came into possession of these notes. 4. The government's explanation of how it took these notes is riddled with self contradiction and lacks common sense. The government referred to Investigator 1, whose role in these events is as mysterious as it is contradictory. The government states that Investigator 1 was assigned by the Bureau of Prisons to participate in a sweep, that he is not part of the government's investigation of the defendant. Yet the government also states that the Investigator 1 was consistently monitoring the defendant's communications. See government's letter of November 18th, paragraph 2. The government also states that grand jury subpoenas and documents requests to BOP for the defendant's monitored communications. Oh my gosh. This letter is silent as to which BOP officials the prosecutors work with in connection with its efforts to secure defendants monitor communications. But it would appear that the prosecutors will work with, among others, Investigator 1. Under the circumstances, the hearing should encompass what connection exists between the prosecution team and Investigator 1. So not only is his defense counsel asking who gave you authorization and, da da da, those 6 questions that were asked in the previous letter, they want to know what connection does the government have with the BOP or this Investigator 1. Second, the government writes that the BOP sweep was pre-planned, not in response to any particular threat or intelligence, and did not target Combs. However, the government also writes that there was nothing improper about Investigator 1 taking the photographs because Investigator 1, who had reviewed the defendant's calls and emails, was entirely justified in inspecting the defendant's assigned bunk to recover additional evidence. The government's position is immediately contradictory because the review of a particular calls and emails is intelligence, and because acting on the intelligence in order to conduct a particular search is targeting Combs. The government's own letter shows that Combs was treated differently from other inmates in that search of his locker and the removal of his notes were based specifically on the intelligence that Investigator 1 developed from listening to his calls and reading his emails. Y'all, I had to take off my sweater because what? The further I read, the further I am shaking my head. Why? I hope. Oh, I gotta wait till, what is it? It comes on at 3, so that's 2 my time. So we got 2 hours. This here is not good. If they like Investigator 1 was listening and reading Combs's emails, and we can only infer that he was going back and telling individuals what happened, because if you go back to the video where the government's opposition to the motion to bill, they were making statements that, he is calling people, he is using other inmates call time or whatever the case was. So somebody had to go back and tell them, yes, they do tap, but I mean, they were this Investigator 1 was investigating. I'm gonna tell you that. And so I don't know who gave him authority to do what he did, but then you go into this man's cell and you look into a folder that clearly states legal, and you taking pictures. Yeah. This is not looking good for the government at all. Third, the BOP sweep was purportedly related to removing contraband at the facility. See the U.S. Department of Justice Federal Bureau of Prisons press release from November 1st, 2024. The release goes on to state the combined operation identified and confiscated a number of electronic devices, drugs, and associated paraphernalia and homemade weapons. Yet, Investigator One apparently used this sweep as a pretext to conduct a targeted seizure of Mr. Combs' handwritten notes about conversations with his lawyers. Tellingly, Investigator One did not report that he had identified and confiscated Sean Combs' notes of conversations with his lawyer to supervisors of the multi-agency law enforcement operation. He went straight to the prosecution team. I don't even have to sit there and further explain that because that sums it up. He didn't even go. The seizure, the search and seizure, well, you could call it that, for the prison was for drugs, and confiscated were phones or electronic devices, drugs. What else did they say? Associated paraphernalia and homemade weapons. So he was like, well, this isn't any of those. So let me just go straight to the persecution. He gonna be the cause. The prosecutors have taken the position that the identification and photographing of Sean Combs' handwritten notes were merely a part of the multi-agency sweep to rid the MDC of drugs or drugs, electronics, and homemade weapons. There are ways of proving such a contention. We could call Investigator One to stand a factual hearing. A hearing should encompass what else Investigator One told the prosecution team with the legal materials he raffled through. At a hearing, we could ask Investigator One why he called the trial prosecutors. What contact had they had beforehand? How did the Investigator One know which notes to photograph? Did Investigator One photograph any notes aside from the 19 pages defense counsel was provided yesterday? Subpoena his phone records. It don't ever go away. What, if any, direction did Investigator One have from the agents conducting the pre planned law enforcement initiative, or was he taking directions from someplace else? The bottom line is that multi agency law enforcement initiative justified raffling through Mr. Combs' personal handwritten notes of conversations with his lawyers, and the prosecutor's argument to the contrary lack all credibility. 5 states the evidence shows there was a law enforcement plot to photograph Mr. Combs' notes, have the taint team not advise counsel, and use these plainly privileged materials to keep Mr. Combs in jail and to gain an unfair trial advantage. I promise you, the more that I'm reading, the more that it's screaming mistrial, mistrial, mistrial. Before Friday evening at 3:30 p.m., defense counsel knew none of this because remember when the government filed that opposition and pretty much put all that was it. Who's gonna be checking their work emails on a weekend or after, you know what I'm saying? Because I have a habit of doing that. I really do. But they found out pretty much the same day. If people like me are watching the docket and reading all of that, I'm sure they saw it on the news. And I can only imagine how everybody was in a frenzy on Saturday and Sunday and yesterday. Let's see. It was not until the government attached 2 pages of defendant's handwritten notes to a letter to keep him in prison that defense counsel learned for the first time that over 2 weeks earlier, Mr. Combs' notes were photographed and provided to the U.S. attorney. In the last 4 days, several things have become clear. First, investigator one, who had been monitoring Mr. Combs' calls and emails, and was absolutely targeting him, seized upon an opportunity to search his cell. He knew that there was a completely unrelated multi agency law enforcement measure planned for October 28th, 2024, one relating to ridding the MDC of weapons, DRUGS, and cell phones, and have nothing to do with an inmate's notes of conversations with his lawyers. Because he had been monitoring Combs' conversation, he conducted a warrant list search of Mr. Combs' papers, not looking for weapons, DRUGS, or cell phones, but for what Combs and his lawyers were discussing and what Combs' trial strategy would be. In a high profile case such as this, where the defense has been unusually outspoken about the lack of meaningful inculpatory evidence, what could be more valuable than photographing defendant's trial strategy with his lawyers? So he photographed pages where the defendant discussed of expert witnesses to call, where he identified witnesses, and where he discussed his thoughts about the credibility of most important witnesses in the case and other things revealing the defense trial strategy. And that's where he messed up at. Now, by the investigator, he probably don't know anything when it comes to the legal pleadings that are filed in a legal case. But when we answer discovery, some of the questions are, who are your expert witnesses? Who are the witnesses that you're going to call a trial? We don't list those in discovery. We just state that we will provide this information based off of the docket control order or the scheduling order when that time comes. Because a scheduling order pretty much sets dates when everything is due. So, for instance, expert witnesses has to be submitted. How can I say this? So you have the expert witnesses, and they'll go through a number of things. They can go through discovery process, and they can also be called to trial. So you have a deadline when experts can submit, any response or opposition to discovery. Now, when it's closer to trial, what happens is we file a trial exhibit list and um, a witness list, and we list everybody that we're going to call to trial. But that is closer to trial time. So by this investigator taking pictures of that, they're right now they are about 12 feet underground, just based on this investigator's action. He is burying deeper and deeper and deeper. I don't even know what to say about that. All right. Let's see where I left off at. Once he photographed these pages, he returned the legal pads and other documents to the original location, so the defendant would have no idea his handwritten notes had been taken in this manner. You might as well should have just kept the documents with you. That was dumb. Then he called the trial prosecutors in this case, oh my gosh, to aid in the investigation, and because he knew he had information that would help them, defendant's trial strategy laid out in his own handwritten notes. Whether he revealed to the prosecution team even more privileged information than what is contained in the notes remains to be seen. Oh my gosh. Next, at the prosecution's team direction, hit the notes to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Y'all have got to be like, did y'all not ask Investigator One how he unless y'all was working with him and y'all knew what he was doing? But what? He sent the notes to the U.S. Attorney's Office to the taint team, whose sole purpose is to ensure that attorney client privilege material is not given to the prosecution team. At no point does the taint team contact defense counsel. At no point does the tank team state in its possession of Sean Combs' handwritten notes. At no point does the tank team ask defense counsel if anything in these handwritten notes is potentially privileged. Given that there was an established protocol in place, it is inconceivable this is a mere oversight. Similarly, inconceivable is how the tank team ostensibly trained to review I said ostensibly trained to review for privileged material and provided with the names of the defense counsel, somehow did not see the obvious privileged nature of the notes. The notes refer to defendant's counsel by name. Oh my gosh. Include discussion of the defense experts and witnesses, discuss cross examination and credibility of witnesses, and overall defense strategy. The taint team even recognized that portions of the notes written on the very same page contained privileged information, yet failed to realize the privileged nature of the rest of the page. The fact that the prosecution team then received these notes from the taint team and likewise failed to understand what had come into their possession is just as rigorous. I agree. I agree. So, U.S. Attorney's Office got these. You read them and, like, oh crap. If it's listing witnesses and stuff like that, and it's him making notes to his, attorney, and the attorney's making come now, even Stevie Wonder can see that. At some point, the trial team comes into possession of 19 pages of materials. At no point does the trial team contact defense counsel to state that there are references to particular potential witnesses or to possible areas of expert testimony, or even to the fact that Combs specifically writes that blase, blase, blase. The trial team didn't tell defense counsel any of this for the same reason the tank team didn't tell defense counsel, and for the same reason the investigator one targeted Combs and photographed these notes in the first place, because there was a plot to get these attorney client material. And once they got them, the first thing they did was use them, specifically use them by putting them in a bail letter to keep Combs in jail. And number 6, a fulsome hearing is required. The government pro-offered explanation for how it got this information is internally inconsistent and not credible. As a result, a hearing is required. Um, I don't even know what to say about this. Um, Hold on, I'm trying to see if I'm pretty sure that those documents are yep. So as far as what they obtained from the locker, all those records are sealed. Of course they're going to be sealed. Baby, boy, if 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock my time don't get here fast enough, cause now I'm invested now. I am truly invested. Because at first I was like, okay, the government, they just need some time to build their case and blase, blase, blase. But now I'm under the impression are y'all stalling because y'all don't have no evidence? Dun, dun, dun. Are y'all stalling because y'all don't have sufficient evidence to properly try this man? Y'all tell me what y'all think about this in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until then, be blessed, and I'm out. Bye.